Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our candidate forum. We are going to start with a prayer. Becky, would you please start us with a prayer?
Dear Lord, thank you very much for the ability to come here, gather and socialize and gain more information. We know that most people have struggles, and we ask that you help us with those struggles. And as always, Lord, we pray for a successful outcome for the J6ers and our beloved President Trump. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you. V, would you please start us in our pledges to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Texas pledge.
On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
I think my
Thank you very much. Before we dive into our candidate forum, I would like to ask Annie Hofer and Mikey Bob to come and sing for us. They have two songs that some of you have already heard and that are very appropriate. The first one explains why we fight. It's called Walk with Trump. The second one is why our justice system is so important, and it's regarding J6. So.
How's everybody doing? You hear me all right? You hear me better? Some people have to do, some folks just hear it. In between is full of fighting words, the united actions do. All one great big America, green, red, white, and blue. All Trump walk together, that's what we will do. People lives are on me, knock down the national debt. Since great people, but they were on the road, united like the dead. Left foot, right foot, make a step for America. Love the border, it's a law and order, they nation under God. Come walk, let's walk with unity and man behind stars and stripes, make America great. Not an education, not a doctor, make priority of our best. Trump brought revolution, it's a common sense solution. No inflation, job creation, real baby dreams. Left foot, right foot, Texas. He's a stolen electric man. Left foot, right foot, made a step for America. Close the border, great nation on the guard. Okay, if y'all are following along on your pages, you know I missed a few words here and there, but I forgot my glasses tonight. But y'all get the point, right? So this next song, another song written by Annie Holt. Annie was at J6, and she came home, and she couldn't believe everybody was calling her a domestic terrorist for being here. So the words just kind of flowed, and she wrote this down. Of course, she's my friend. I like to sing her songs for her. She's a heck of a songwriter. You want to cancel us, we will pray for you. Love our God, red, white, and blue, they call us terrorists, domestic terrorists. Truth and justice, God be our light, and propaganda. All on news at night to call us terrorists, domestic terrorists. Cause and country, America first. We stand for the flag, free speech, no way to terror. Our children, when you'll see our children, have to ask this thing, in their identity and drag queen. You will not succeed. Call and name what you do on the list, and call so many names. They call us terrorists, domestic terrorists. January 6th, school boards get jacked, mandates and censorship, gun control, we won't be had. We are patriots, we love country and God. We are proud Americans, we're proud Americans. Freedom, family, country, and God, we're proud Americans. We're
Thank you very much to both of you. I would like now to give some thanks to a lot of people. First, the candidates who are here. I don't know if you all know, but they come from pretty far away, all the way from Dallas to Houston and everything in between. So we are very appreciative to have them here for the first time in Corpus Christi. I don't think we ever had justice to the Supreme Court in Corpus Christi. So this is a real first. So thank you so much. So first, yeah. So the first one we have is Justice John Devine, running for re-election at the Texas Supreme Court. I've known John, in fact, for now almost 15 years. I endorsed him when he was running for the first time, when we were at the Tea Party in the Woodlands. So we go quite a long way, and I'm so glad and honored that he was able to be here today. Next one is David Schenk, who has been one of the lead and the most vocal in denouncing some of the corruption in our higher courts. I think he has fought against that, and we are grateful for that, because very often we had no idea what was going on sometimes there. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for staying in the fight. The next one is Michelle Slaughter. We also go a pretty long way, about in the same years, in around 2010. So Michelle is running for, so I forgot to say, David Schenk is running for Chief Justice of the Criminal Court of Appeals. Michelle is running for place 8 to that same court. So thank you for being here. We're very appreciative. And then Gina Parker is running for place 7 of that same court. We endorsed also Gina a few years back, like David did. We endorsed the 2 others way back. So we're glad to have you all here now. So thank you. I would like also to thank our elected officials, and some of the candidates who are not there yet. In fact, local candidates, I think they're all at either fundraiser that they're holding or someone's fundraiser, and several have said they would arrive as soon as they could. So I think they will join us pretty soon. Jenny Dorsey, our county attorney, is here. Thank you. I don't know if I missed some that arrived in the meantime. Are there any other candidates that are here? Not yet, huh? And of course, I would like to thank you, the voters, because without you, there's no elections, right? And election in the primary are essential. As you know, we always say that's the most important part of the election cycle. So in the primary, first your vote counts a lot, because very few people vote, so every single vote has a lot of weight. But also this is the only time where you have a choice. You vote in the primary to choose the best candidate to represent you. In November, you're not going to have a choice anymore. You just will have to vote for the Republican candidate. So thank you for doing that. I also want to address quickly the question that we always get: how come you endorse before the forums? Well, we don't have a choice. Our endorsements are dictated by the election calendar. Filing finishes mid-December. We start right away contacting all the candidates in contested races. In our county, we vote in 14 different contested races. That means 71 candidates. So we try to reach them. We send them our vetting questionnaire. We study them. We do our endorsement. And then we start preparing the work, which is preparing bags. As you know, on the island we do 5,000 bags for block walking, and then we block walk at all the different polling places. So all that takes a lot of time, and it's a very tight schedule. So, but it is very important for us. So we could say, well, once we have endorsed, we don't need to hear the other candidates. That's not the way we see it. We think it's very important to give an opportunity to all the candidates who have the courage to throw their hat in the ring, to have them come and be able to address everyone. We think that's very important. So thank you, Michelle, for being here. We really appreciate that. So right now, as you know, early voting has started, and we're just 10 days away from Election Day. So we need a lot of help until Election Day. So please volunteer, we need you. So before we start, I had asked Judge Ina Klein if she could prepare a little summary for us of what those higher courts are, what is their role, and why they are so important. People have no idea, so they say, oh, that's far away, it doesn't concern us, we don't care. Yes, we should care. That's what rules our political life, and that's also what rules very often our personal lives. So yes, we should know and we should care. So Ina could not be with us tonight, and she has asked her friend and our friend, Jeannie Dorsey, if she could represent her. So Jeannie, will you please?
All right, guys, bear with me. It's kind of long. And I know that anything that she wrote incorrectly will be corrected by the actual candidates. So, here you go, from Ina Klein. The structure of the judiciary of Texas is found in Article 5 of the Constitution of Texas. So it's there for you to look at. It also is defined by statute in the Texas Government Code and the Texas Probate Code. State courts in Texas structure 3 levels: trial, which you probably have the most exposure to, if any, appellate, and supreme. Trial court, there are over 507 state district courts. The number of the court, and you may have heard this before, such as the 214th for Judge Klein, refers to the order of creation of the courts by the legislature. Thus, the higher the number, the more recent the court's creation. By looking at the number, you can't tell its location, just the order in which it was created, okay? So, for example, in Nueces, we have the 28th, the 105th, the 319th, 347th, the 117th, 94th, 148th, and the 214th, the other Klein, right? So the 28th is the first one created, and the 347th, does that make sense, is the most recently created. The district courts have exclusive jurisdiction over felony cases, also cases involving title to land and election contest cases, very important. District courts share jurisdiction with the county courts for civil cases. More money in felony court, district court, and then lesser money in the county courts. Family law jurisdiction varies depending on the existence of a county court at law. In the larger counties such as Harris, the district courts are specialized with designation of criminal, juvenile, family matters, and non-family civil. Here we have County Court 5. You may be aware it handles a lot of the only the juvenile and cases like that. There are over 500 county courts. There are over 800 justice of the peace courts, so your local JP courts. And there are over 900 municipal courts. For the appellate court, if a party is unhappy with the outcome of the lower level trial, they can appeal it to one of the 14 state appellate courts. Nueces County is in the 13th Court of Appeals territory. Other counties within the 13th, it's a long list, guys: Aransas, Goliad, Clayburgh, Refugio, B, Gonzales, Lavaca, San Patricio, Calhoun, Hidalgo, Live Oak, Victoria, Cameron, Jackson, Matagorda, Wharton, DeWitt, Kennedy, and Willis. That's a large place to run in. The appellate courts review the trial court's record and decide what to do. They only look at the record. I don't know if y'all realize that. When that lady's taking down the thing, that's what the courts have as far as what happened. So the trial courts reveal the trial court's record and decide what to do. If a party is unhappy with the appellate court's decision, they appeal it further to either one of two things, the Texas Supreme Court or the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Texas is the only state besides Oklahoma to have a bifurcated appellate system at the highest level. Told ya. Texas Supreme Court hears civil cases, including juvenile cases, and may also hear a specific issue from the federal Fifth Circuit courts if there's a certified question of law, very narrow question of law, okay, of state law. In this scenario, Texas Supreme Court does not decide the case entirely, but merely that narrow question of law, that certified question pertaining to the state law, and then sends the case back to federal court for the overall decision. The Court of Criminal Appeals hears criminal case appeals, including death penalty appeals. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, it exercises discretionary review over criminal cases. The only cases that this court must hear are those involving the sentences of capital punishment or the denial of bail. Court of Criminal Appeals is based in the Supreme Court building in downtown Austin and is composed of one presiding judge and 8 judges. Appeals from this court go to the Supreme Court of the United States. Each judge serves a 6-year term beginning January 1 and ending December 31st, and the judges are all elected at the staggered partisan elections. All 9 seats are elected at large, but the presiding judge seat is separately designated, as you can see. To be on the court, you must be at least 35 years of age, a United States and Texas citizen, for real, licensed to practice law in Texas, must have practiced for at least 10 years. Wouldn't be better if it was more. A person 75 years or older cannot run for a seat on the Court of Criminal Appeals, but judges who turn 75 during their term of office may serve until December 31st of the 4th year of their term. For the Texas Supreme Court, it is the court of last resort for civil matters in the state of Texas. The court has its seat at the Supreme Court building on the state capitol grounds in Austin, Texas. Appeals from this court also go to the Supreme Court of the United States. Terms are 6 years, 9 positions. The Texas Supreme Court consists of a Chief Justice and 8 associate judges. All 9 positions are elected. The Chief Justice is Nathan Hecht. The Chief has special administrative responsibilities. Each justice has 1 vote and may issue a dissenting or concurring opinion. I don't know if y'all have, there's no reason you will have ever looked at a case, but you have the stuff that we use at the top, and then at the bottom you may have a dissenting or a concurring opinion, always very interesting. Granted cases, the ones they're going to hear, are assigned to Justice Chambers for opinion authorship by draw. Grants require 4 votes. Per curiam opinions may be issued if at least 6 judges agree. Petitions for review are automatically denied after 30 days unless at least 1 justice pulls them off of the conveyor belt. Last little bit. Requirements to serve are the same as for the Criminal Court of Appeals. All members of the Texas Supreme Court typically belong to the same party because all are elected in statewide races, rather than by the electorates of smaller appellate districts. Most of the current justices were originally appointed either by the former Governor Rick Perry or the current Governor Greg Abbott. The proper designation for a member of the Texas Supreme Court is Justice. The proper designation for a member of the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is Judge. Thank you, Judge Klein.
Thank you very much, Jeannie. That was very nice. So, now we're ready to dive in. Our moderator tonight will be Ed Humans. Ed is a 24-year Air Force veteran who continues to serve in the Air Force Reserves. He's a very successful serial entrepreneur who lives here on the island full-time. He has served on a number of boards and commissions, such as an ethics commissioner, civil service commission chair, chamber board, and police foundation boards. He was the president of the Williamson County Republican Leaders. He has been a precinct chair 2 separate times and served multiple times as delegate to county, Senate district, and state convention. Please help me welcome Ed Humans.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Suzanne. All right, I have my notes here. I just wanted to start off with a few comments and thank our servers behind the bar here at the Boathouse. So thank you very much for everything this evening. Just so everyone's aware as well, the bar is open to the public, so if people are coming in and out, they may be looking, the sun's already set, but they're gonna be ordering at the bar, so they're just doing their job in addition to serving us. We have 2 separate forums this evening, but we've all agreed to kind of have a hybrid version. We're gonna start off the first one. The first forum is gonna be with Justice John Devine, our incumbent justice for the Texas Supreme Court, Place 4. We've already gone over some of the times, so at this time, let's welcome Justice Devine, and he has around 10 minutes for his opening comments.
Thank you. Am I permitted to roam around, or do I have to stay in front of the camera?
Yeah, be careful. Just don't go in front of the speaker.
Okay, all right. Well, good evening. Okay. All right, I'll avoid that. I'll roam right here. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Devine. I have had the honor for the past almost 12 years to serve in the capacity as Justice of the Texas Supreme Court, Place 4. There are 9 places. Actually, and I'll clarify, yes, most of the justices on the Supreme Court have either been appointed by Governor Perry or Governor Abbott. I and the Chief Justice are the only justices that actually found our roots in actually being elected by the people in the state of Texas. So that's a unique title to have. And so I want to, I guess, give you a little bit of insight personally about me. I've been married to my wife, Nubia, for 34 years, and we've had 7 children. And of course, you know, I do figure that out, what causes that sort of thing. And she unfortunately couldn't be with me tonight. She's attending a wedding out of country, and but she gives her, of course, blessing for me to be here and says hello. Experience and qualifications really ought to matter when you have the court of last resort that decides fundamentally very important issues of guarding the citizens of the state of Texas, how Texas does its business, the rights, individual rights of individuals that are affected by government, that may be abused by government agencies, which is often what we see and hear about. And so the things that we do are extremely consequential. And I'll get a chance, I think, to go into maybe a couple of those in my opening, but hopefully in questions I can expound on some of those important issues. But a little bit about my background, because it's unique. It's unique in terms of members on the court. My beginnings started when I drove to Texas. I was hired by Shell Oil Company back in the early 80s. And I started my career at Shell. I was on the executive management training program. And what that means was they wanted me to learn the entirety of Shell's business from the ground up. So I spent my years there going to different business units and learning how business was done the Shell way. And, you know, involved in the oil, the refining business, and E&P, research, head office. I did everything, and during that same time, they sent me to law school. And so I would have the pleasure of beginning my workday at 7 a.m., and after I was finished at work at 4, I had the pleasure of driving downtown Houston for 5 years to get my law degree. After completing the law degree in a few years, I then moved over to Brown and Root. Now, Brown and Root at the time was the largest industrial construction, E&P, construction company in the world. And so in Brown and Root, I was in project management, I was in head office, and so I was a part of essentially some of the most exciting and dynamic worldwide construction projects, from oil refineries to chemical plants, paper mills, automobile manufacturing facilities, pharmaceutical plants. We built it all, domestically and internationally. And I had the honor of really serving in mining businesses. Anything that seemed like at the time, anything over $1 billion. We got involved in, and you don't see that really anymore, which is a crime, which I guess is indicative of how our economies are in decline, and they are in decline. After my time at Brown and Root, through the influence of Rush Limbaugh, interestingly enough, I ran for district judge in Houston. I ran against a person who had thrown Christians in jail for praying in front of the local area abortion clinics in the 1992 convention that the Republicans held in Houston. I didn't beat her the first time because I was just a name on the ballot, or I wasn't on the ballot. It was a write-in campaign, and so I didn't win that time, but I came back 2 years later, defeated her. I'm best known on the district court as having been the judge that was sued for having the 10 Commandments in my courtroom. And I took that case through the state court system, I took it through the federal system, and actually won it in the United States Fifth Circuit, and kept the 10 Commandments in my courtroom, believe it or not. But also I was known for having reduced my court's docket by 80% during my tenure at the court. When the Republicans took over the district courts from the Democrats in '94, it was a mess. The court had 110,000 cases pending. That's how the backlog was. By the time I left, the court had 20,000. My court went from 5,000 down to under 1,000 during my tenure at the court. So we worked hard. The Republican candidates, not just me, but all of the judges that were elected, worked very hard. It was a very competitive environment. So we always tried to do our best on behalf of the people. After my time on the district court, I went back into private practice. I had my own law firm. I worked for individuals and building businesses and so forth. And then in 2012, I ran for the Texas Supreme Court and actually defeated an incumbent justice on the court, which is very rarely done, especially on the Supreme Court. And somehow, God willing, we were able to do it, and the rest is history. On the court, I have distinguished myself, at least other organizations seem to say that I'm the most consistent conservative vote on the court. I model that after Judge Antonin Scalia, who was a constitutional constructionist. He in fact, motivated me, and over the years, he was a mentor to me before he passed. He was our liaison from the U.S. Supreme Court to Texas. And what that means is that one of the justices on the court fellowship and sort of mentor various state courts within certain jurisdictions and so forth. And we had the honor of having him with us for those many years that I was at least on the court and before he passed. So there's a number of opinions. I will give you one opinion just for now in my opening that I feel like is important to kind of give you the understanding and feel of how consequential the things that we do are. And you'll remember that in 2020 with COVID, there was this insane rush to set aside rationality, to set aside state law. We had executive level officials setting aside state law as it pertains to the election code. And so we had all kinds of crazy things going on a state level election-wise. We had drive-through voting. where all you had to do was drive in. You could have 15 people in the car, and they'd come out, and they're not looking for IDs, and they voted. Thousands and thousands of people in Harris County is where the great abuses happened, of course. And then they had concert voting, ladies and gentlemen. That means that what they would do is the county would bring in some celebrity like Madonna, and they would give this some airtime, and they would bring in thousands and thousands of young minds full of mush, and they would organize them, and you'd have to go through these voting stalls before you could get to go in the concert. So we had that to fool with. We had extensions of time for early voting. We had all sorts of new voting locations. They took the largest Republican voting precinct in Clear Lake and moved it to a mosque. So you had senior citizens that have voted in that location their entire lives, and now all of a sudden it's moved to, of course, your neighborhood-friendly mosque. I don't know what happened with that in terms of the volume of turnout, but I'm sure it discouraged some. It discouraged some. But what happened was, in Harris County, they tried to send out 3.5 million applications for ballot by mail. Okay. Let that sink in. 3.5 million applications to go out to everybody that would then be able to be harvested down the road. We said no, and we stopped them. Those things stayed on the voting docket. Had we not stopped that, Harris County, I would dare say, and the state of Texas would be Democrat right now. So.
Thank you. So we're going to move into the question and answer phase. So if you have a question, please come over here. We don't have another wireless microphone, but we have about 20 minutes worth of questions. So I'm sure something has arose. So any questions? Yeah.
Real quick, sir, can you explain in layman terms exactly what harvesting is?
Harvesting?
Yes.
Well, so they mail out, they have a list of names and so forth, and they could be people living or deceased, fake names, and they will send a ballot to an address. They have addresses pre-staged and so forth. Any ballot that's out there, and what they found in Harris County is if you got a ballot by mail and you didn't send it in, if you show up to vote, they'd say, oh, well, we're sorry, you can't vote because we've already sent you a ballot. And so there were a number of complaints in the system at that point where the people said, well, I didn't vote and I didn't get one, and they still were not allowed to vote in Harris County. That took place. So you have ballot harvesters who would receive these ballots. Maybe they went to an office building somewhere, and you had hired hands. This is undisputed. I mean, this is in, there's numerous affidavits and records that prove that there are ballot harvesting locations in Harris County at the time, paid for by Sylvester Turner and the rest of the folks in Harris County. It's always been a common practice. I'm from Harris County, so I can tell you that over and over we would get cases involving large numbers of ballots being mailed to the P.O. boxes you can buy. And because you're supposed to only have one, a ballot has to go to a residence. But what we saw in Harris County were tens of thousands of ballots going to P.O. boxes, which is a violation. So people would go to those P.O. boxes, take those ballots, fill them out, and send them in. And so that's essentially what harvesting is. So imagine sending out 3.5 million. We'd have been counting ballots for some period of time just to make sure you get the right number so that the whole, not just Harris County changes. With 3.5 million, you could have changed the outcome of the entire state. I can't hear you, but I'll come closer.
Sorry.
Yeah. That happened in 96, 97. I was sued by a lawyer that was in my courtroom who said that because of the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet another's property. Therefore, I was alluding to the jurors that they would not be able to award his client a large sum of money.
Yeah. So I think so there was not very well educated, because in my country, when I was in the college, they have beautiful solar ceramic in that big glass.
Yeah.
So all of the America, beautiful America, was regard to glass. They should not do it that big, because that's simple disgusting.
Well, of course. Well, but these people believe, madam, that there is a separation of church and state. That's this fiction that people have created. There is. Well, yeah, that's right. It's actually the cornerstone of Western civilization. So, you know, and let me tell you a little bit about that case. So he was representing a young man who worked for McDonald's, and one evening he went out to take the trash out. And when he went out there, and unbeknownst to McDonald's, he was a member of a gang. And he had done something, apparently, that upset the gang members. And so they met him out at the trash bin area. And they beat him to death. So the lawsuit that I was asked to look at was a case involving a lawsuit suing McDonald's for millions of dollars for somehow they were culpable in what these gang members did to one of their employees. We have something in the law called a summary judgment, where as a matter of law, there is no cause of action against McDonald's. They had nothing to do with this crime that was committed on this young man. So I threw the case out, which I should have, and that ended up going all the way down the line. And because of that, he said, well, there must be a reason. Well, it's those 10 commandments that, you know, this guy is a nut. And so this fella who sued me was a gay atheist. He was antagonistic to me anyway. And, you know, he drugged me through state court, and, you know, where they challenged my credibility and, you know, ability to sit in the case. And like I said, that got dismissed in state court, went to federal district court. The judge there dismissed it. He appealed it to the United States Fifth Circuit. And I'll tell you the rest of that story. So Dan Patrick, who was your lieutenant governor, had a radio station in Houston at the time. And he called me and he said, John, this guy is going to come on my radio show, and I think it'd be pretty neat for you to debate him on the radio show. And I said, Dan, look, I'm the defendant in this case, and I can't just go on a radio show and talk about a case that's in the courts right now. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 10 very specifically worded questions that I think, depending on how he answers them, is going to expose that he lied either in the state court proceeding or he lied in the federal court proceeding. But one way or another, there's inconsistencies in these filings, and I think the Fifth Circuit will recognize that and dismiss the case. Sure enough, the questions were asked, the answers were transcribed, and I attached the answers to a dismissal in the United States Fifth Circuit. They looked at it and dismissed the case. So that's what happened there. And, you know, we didn't really decide the merits, but you didn't need to. I mean, you caught him lying. And you know, the federal courts don't think that's real cute. So, more questions? If not, I'll ask myself questions. I've got plenty of time. Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, yes, sir.
You said Antonin Scalia was your
mentor. Yes, sir. Yes. Alito. He's a great guy. Although he hasn't been here. I don't know that if he perceives us needing his attention or what, but at least I think he's been here to speak at an event or two, but I haven't yet met him. Justice Thomas has been. The last time I saw him was in Waco. For some reason, I don't remember why. I think he was a speaker and so forth. Another great guy, another hero. Okay, well listen, so I indicated, since I have time, I indicated there are other cases where I think I have distinguished myself. And usually, unfortunately, that means I've had to distinguish myself in dissents, which is a minority view of the world. as it pertains to a case. One of those cases happened a couple of years ago in the case involving the railroad, this bullet train that a foreign company came into the United States, registered as a railroad, and said, we want to build a railroad line from Houston to Dallas. But in order to do that, ladies and gentlemen, they have to have the power of eminent domain, which is to come in and take your property. As a citizen of the United States and Texas, they thought that by virtue of being a so-called registering as a railroad, they had the power to do that. Now think of that. Think of the consequences of allowing corporations to come in here and register through some slick lawyering and be able to have the power to go and split your 10,000 acre farm, or it's got oil wells on it and farming and so forth, what that would do to you. So the case came to us, and the first question to answer is it a railroad? Well, 8 of my colleagues said, yeah, it looks like it is. You know, they're going to transport folks from point A to point B, and it's got railroad tracks in it. Although I think it was an electric one of these deals where the lines are draped across and so forth. And so I looked at it and said, well, historically, railroads were different. The great railroads, the Santa Fe Northern, all these BSNF, all of these railroads that were founded in the 1800s, really, moving people was almost incidental to it. What they were moving were commodities and materials. They were building the country, ladies and gentlemen. They weren't just moving, they weren't just competing against Southwest Airlines. They were doing more than that. So that was sort of the first beat. Then the next question is, if they are a railroad, don't they just automatically get eminent domain? And 8 of them said, yeah, yes they do. And I said, no, that power has always been specifically designated by your elected representatives. These rascals that are in the House of Representatives and so forth. Those are because they're accountable to you. I mean, do you really want 8, 9 judges to decide what the law is in that? Or should you be able to hold your elected representatives accountable? Now, of course, the problem with that for them is a lot of them live in your backyard. They live in these rural areas. And they certainly don't want to go on the record as saying, yeah, you can take my constituents' property over here. I mean, that's got a bad optics to it for them politically. So instead, it became our decision. And I resisted it, and I fought it, and I said no. You know, it's interesting in the Communist Manifesto that the first thing they do is to confiscate private property. When they start doing that, folks, it's on the way downhill. So I dissented to that opinion, and it was 8-1. Another example of that was, for instance, ERCOT. So ERCOT, and you'll remember ERCOT was this quasi-government entity that was created by the legislature. At least it was created by the legislature. And, you know, after evaluating that, the question was a twofold question. Is it a governmental entity? And it was created by the legislature, so you had to agree that it was a governmental entity. But did it have immunity? Because what they were fighting over is that they had been sued. I mean, remember, there were 200 lives lost during the freeze. There were hundreds of billions of dollars of property damage across the state of Texas. And yet the people had no recourse. They wanted the people to have no recourse for these significant damages to their lives and to their property. And so they were coming to us to say, hey, you know, we want you to, you know, verify this and so forth and rule in our favor. And again, I said, look, you may be a governmental entity, but the legislature still has to specifically give you that great power of immunity. That means you're free to kind of conduct yourself any way you want to conduct. There's no accountability to them, folks. And And that is against the precedent that we've had for years and years in Texas. So again, it was an 8-1 decision. I said, you know, the people ought to have the decision in this through their elected representatives so you could hold those folks accountable instead of us. Again, the oath I take is to enforce the statutes, the laws, the Constitution of the state of Texas and the United States Constitution. Not to make laws up as we go. Not to create things that aren't specifically said by the legislature. I'd rather the legislature do that because that's who you can hold accountable. Another example, back during the COVID scam was the Texas convention. You'll remember so in 2020, we get to Friday before the Monday. The convention is supposed to kick off, for crying out loud. And we find out, oh my goodness, the Democrats said, look, we're going to call it off for you. Even though the Republicans have paid tens of thousands of dollars for all these modifications, you know, plexiglass, hand washing things and so forth. All of this was already expended, and they came to the Republicans. It was either Thursday or Friday, said, we've decided it's a safety risk. We're sorry you're not going to be able to have your convention. So, you know, you can look at that and say, well, are these people really in good faith? Are they really sorry, the Republicans, the Democrats in Harris County, sorry that you can't have your convention? Well, there's such a thing as specific performance. You know, if we're all going to be fair and so forth. They had a contract, and the contract was real vague. And so, you know, the votes are coming out, and my goodness, the court appears to say, yeah, we're not going to hear the case. And I was shocked. I was really kind of shocked. And I understand, look, no court wants to appear to be political, but for crying out loud, this was just a blatant abuse of contract law and taking advantage of this situation. All the money was spent. The party was in good faith. And I didn't care if somebody thought I was being political or not. I wanted to do what was right. So again, I stood 8-1 and said we should enforce this contract and let the contract go forward. I mean, after all, it's a bunch of Republicans there. They should have been tickled to death. They were all exposed to COVID and so forth. But it's not the way it worked. So again, another example of really a system that oftentimes, you know, you need a voice on the court to stand up and say, you know, this is just not right. And it has to be you know, I'm not the sharpest knife in the box here. I understand that. But I come to the court with a certain common sense approach of how the world really works. And sometimes those sorts of ideas and notions are important if you're going to achieve justice. I was always taught as a trial judge that rule one is to do justice. And so that's kind of my approach as an appellate judge for these many 12 years. It has served me well. I would love to continue doing that on your behalf. As I said, I do have an opponent. I have never met him. You said, where is he? He's in his attic. You know, he's been able to do these videos and accuse me of a laundry list of awful things. I mean, he's accused me of covering for pedophiles, ladies and gentlemen. I'm on and on and on and on. I'm treated, I've never seen. And this guy is a second court of appeals judge out of Fort Worth. And he hasn't had the decency to come out into the public and explain his virtues. And try to give you, subject himself to your questions, to expose his record, his qualifications. He hasn't given you that chance. All he can do is lay up somewhere and throw bombs at you. Yes, ma'am.
I have some questions because I see for a lot of us to realize so not just on the political side, but also also in our daily life. There are a few cases, I think, that came in front of the Supreme Court, like the use or not of plastic bags. I think that was typically something that affects all of us, or parental rights.
We said you could use plastic bags, if I remember.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh,
That was actually out of Corpus Christi.
But that's one of the things that
Yeah.
comes to the Supreme Court, so that affects our daily life.
Yeah, it affects everybody's life. I mean, we had a case that I authored the opinion having to do with police officers and them handcuffing individuals as they arrest them. You can imagine that as a police officer is having to wrestle on the ground with some guy who's high on drugs or alcohol or something, he's fighting him, okay? And sometimes things get rough. And so what would typically happen, this guy would get roughed up a little bit because he's fighting and resisting arrest, and he would turn around and sue the police officer. And so the case came up to us as if this is some sort of horrible situation and so forth, and it happens thousands of times a year, at least it used to. Well, we shut it down. I shut it down in my majority, I think it was unanimous. It was a unanimous decision to stop this nonsense because there was some interpretation under Texas law whether or not, he had a right to do this. And we shut that down. That affects your lives because it affects the police officers, and we want good law enforcement people who are honest and so forth. There are some exceptions, as I've heard references to January 6ers. And we know that can't say that about that outfit. But any other questions that we might have? Yes, sir.
Go ahead, sir. The border situation there with the governor trying to take action out of I guess from my understanding, it's already been determined several times that the U.S. Supreme Court, not the U.S. Supreme Court, but the appellate court has determined that the U.S. immigration law is the purview of the federal government. How is the governor able to,
Well, because once the governor declares an invasion, changes the deal under the Constitution. And the state has an inherent right. The citizens of Texas have an inherent right to protect themselves against an invading army. Are we supposed to sit around with our arms crossed and let thousands of people carrying poisonous drugs into our neighborhoods and our schools and so forth? That's my thought on that. But generally speaking, yes, it's always been argued, well, that's a federal issue. I guess we're just committing suicide. No, that's not the way it is. But you have to be audacious and bold. I believe Abbott has done some of that over the last few weeks in mustering the military and the Texas troopers and everybody there at the border to stem that tide. And then, of course, bringing in all these other state guards to help bolster that. I don't know what the status is. Unfortunately, I've been busy campaigning because I have an opponent. And he wants me to stay in Austin all day long, and I imagine he does. But I have to get out with you folks and explain myself, explain my record, and emphasize to you the importance of this race. I don't know who's behind him, although I just, this business of laying behind the log and hiding yourself in the attic or the basement, that's a technique we've seen from other camps. And so, I'm not saying it's the same deal, but it looks awfully close. Yes, sir.
Actually, we're out of time. So
Okay. Do I have?
Yeah,
Sure.
We'll do
No, 45.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, plenty of time.
First,
Right?
Yes, sir.
you mentioned dissenting in 9-1.
8-1.
8-1.
Yes.
9-1. Does it have to be unanimous for it to pass? Or is it like
No, it could be 5-4.
Okay, all right.
There's a number of.
All right, so
Yeah.
even if you're the lone dissenter,
Yes.
they would still.
My opinion still is published.
Right.
And I do that because if I disagree strongly and really feel that fundamental constitutional rights are at stake, like property rights and immunity issues, and we can go into all kinds of other issues I think are important, I will write. And I have a duty to write. Because I want the public to understand that maybe they need to go to their legislature now and say, we think Devine's right. And I'll give you an example of this. And I've been able to change some views and outcomes. Back in 2015, thereabouts, we had, you'll remember the Obergefell case out of Washington, D.C., which gave license to people of the same sex to be married. And with that came certain rights that entitled them to taxpayer dollars. And there are people in this country that have very strong religious views, deeply held convictions about these subjects that they don't feel. It's like paying for abortions, okay? And they were offended by this idea that tax dollars, that cities and others would have to pay the benefits, employment benefits, for these same-sex couples. And so the case came up through Harris County. A lot of our business comes from Harris County. And so it came up through Harris County. The trial judge said, you can't do that. That's, if you'll recall, in the 2000s, we passed what was called the Defense of Marriage Act, which essentially outlawed that kind of thing. Okay, it was a marriage between a man and a woman. That was voted in by 77% of the public. It's not some outlier decision. And so the judge, rightfully so, said, no, that's illegal. And so, because you remember the mayor in Houston was a lesbian, and she married some gal, and they went off got married, and another judge out there married his buddy, and they married in Las Vegas, came back and said, oh gee, now we all get benefits. And these saps out here have to pay for it. And they're laughing. I understand. And so, it goes to the Court of Appeals that at that point had been taken over by the Democrats, and they looked at it and said, heck, this is fine for us. And so then it came up to the Supreme Court. And, everybody's wringing their hands and, gee, this is awful political, and of course I'm, kind of excited about taking the case, and I find out, no, they don't have any interest in taking this case. And so I wrote an 11-page dissent outlining the trouble with this, outlining, in fact, quoting Justice Kennedy himself, where he had indicated in a previous case involving benefits of this nature that it should be up to each state legislature to specifically award benefits for same-sex marriage. But of course they don't want to do that because you would hold them accountable. So they'd rather us just interpret that and make it sort of a de facto law or opinion so that would have to happen. And so I wrote this dissent. And of course, everybody's, one of the criteria before we take a case, this is only to take the case. There isn't any, substantive ruling here. It's just to take the case and hear it. That's all it was. And so so all of a sudden, the people, the legislature, started to read my dissent, and they went so far as to issue what's called an amici, which is a writing defending one position or another. And in this case, they were defending my position and said, look, we should take the case. We should take the case. Okay, then all of a sudden, the Attorney General got involved. He said, no, you should take this case. It's important to the jurisprudence of the state of Texas. This is costing Texas taxpayers billions of dollars. You need to take the case. And then the Lieutenant Governor got involved. Did another amicus say, you need to take this case. Then the governor himself said you should take the case. So in the next conference, the Chief Justice looked up and said, you know, I've never seen this happen before. The entirety of state government has just asked us to take the case. By virtue of that definition of what that means, and because of our criteria of whether or not it's important to the jurisprudence of the state, by virtue of all the state government telling us to take the case, he said we need to take this case. So we took the case, changed the hearts and minds of all my colleagues. We took the case, and the opinion was written beautifully by one of my colleagues. So that's an example. You can move the needle, but you got to stay in the fight. You can't just roll over. You've got to be persistent in marshaling support, even after you may think it's dead. And that's about the third one that I've had the honor of changing the direction of when it was denied and in the trash. And it comes back on rehearing, and then to get it reconsidered. Anybody else?
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
Can you comment on, especially the things we've seen recently here, with degradation of our First Amendment rights, especially with regards to efforts by our government to use terms like disinformation, and censor people?
Yeah.
I kind of view that as a very existential threat
Yes.
to everything we stand for.
Well, here's an example of a case that touches on. We were the first state, or we're not just the state, we're the first court in the United States, federal or state, to rule against Facebook and say, you don't have complete and total immunity. And the case was about the sex trafficking of little girls. And Facebook has a platform, its business model is sort of fashioned to facilitate that kind of activity. And these families, girls, there's 7 of them, and they bring this case to us. And of course, everybody's kind of worried about the outcome of that because, look, nobody wants to be the first. I don't know why. I love being the first. Nothing to be ashamed about being the first, especially in this case when you're talking about sex trafficking. So for the first time, we overruled and said, yeah, I know, you understand, Congress gave you immunity, but it didn't go that far, partner. And of course, they're horrified because that opens up a lot of opportunities for others. Well, they immediately settled that case because I thought, oh good, that's going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court and they're going to get locked in. Well, they're smarter than that. They didn't want that going to, I think Trump had his 3 people on there, and I think there would have been a affirmance of our decision on the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's where it stayed. And but in terms of we don't reach out and pull things out of the public purview to decide. They have to be brought to us, and they have to be brought to us in a very precise way. And the issues need to be isolated. There's a great deal of complexity that goes into bringing a case before the court of last resort. And, not enough things are brought to us. But our job is not to reach out and change any of that. We have to take what's properly before us. Other questions? Yeah. Oh,
Sure, we'll do one last question, and if you don't mind, we'll move on.
Okay.
Closing comments.
Okay.
What is the criteria for
Taking a case?
taking?
Okay, that's a good question. It's a fair question.
What do we have to do to get a case in front?
Well, what we look at, and I'm sure my colleagues might have different ways of doing it, but if there's any conflict, if you will, if there are conflicts in opinions from the appellate courts, the 14 appellate courts that Suzanne talked about, or the county attorney talked about. If there's conflicts around the state of Texas, it's our job to resolve those conflicts. And that's important because the law needs to be properly applied, consistently applied across the width and breadth of Texas, so that everybody knows what the rules are. Now, we don't want people going to Tyler to get a different outcome. They should be able to be comfortable enough in knowing no matter where they go, they're going to get the same outcome. Okay, so our job is to make sure that's all cut and dry. The next thing is that what attracts my attention is if there is a constitutional challenge. If there's some gun issue or property rights issue or speech issue, attack on a statute. I mean, right now we have in our court, and it's public knowledge, there's an attack on the pro-life bill that was recently passed. And we ruled on that bill. And the petitioner in that case was arguing that she had a medical exception. And the court unanimously said, no, we understand the nature of this, but we don't believe it fits within the context of what the statute says. We have another one on the sexual mutilation of children, for crying out loud, the statute that passed there. And I might add, there was a case that came before us subject to that, and I dissented on that case. That was the younger case out of Dallas, where this little boy was essentially kidnapped, taken to California, because they just were going to change the law in California to claim ownership of this child, this 9-year-old little boy, for crying out loud. And so the father came to us, and he pled, and he wept, and he said, I want my son back. He was subject to a district court order where nothing was supposed to happen to him. And I said, I agree. We should grant the mandamus. We should at least tell the state of California, bring that son of Texas back here, darn it. And I lost it 8-1. So, these are, in my view, very important precedent-setting issues that have to be resolved properly. Otherwise, the consequences, ladies and gentlemen, are disastrous for families and people, especially for this little boy. I mean, the arguments I heard was, well, the father didn't do it right, and the son didn't set the proper way that day, and he's not fit, or they're not fit, and it's not about them. It's about this 9-year-old boy. Can we get focused on the issue? Kind of a thing, It's about this little boy whose life is going to be destroyed. Not about the parents, really. It's about this little boy. And we had the power. We had the power to reach over and grab this child. And I say exercise it. Do justice. So here we are. Early voting has started. I need your help. I need you to spread the word. The importance to the Supreme Court, if we lose one justice on the court who has other agendas, it could be disastrous. You're not going to get, I've given you example after example of opinions you would never have seen. To know what was happening to your jurisprudence. The role, as I see it, is to give you that insight into those other the consequences and have a choice. To be able to go to, see, we work hand in glove with the legislature, really. We can point out things to them. And sometimes in the next session, they'll come back and fix these things. But if no one from the court says anything about it, they won't know. They won't do anything about it. And so it's important. And I'm not trying to be a troublemaker, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to give voice to the voiceless. And the voiceless, unfortunately, is you. Because if you don't know what's going on, then you're not going to know. And you're not going to know what to object to your local legislators and your senators and so forth. So it has been nothing short of a great joy and pleasure, a great honor to serve in this capacity. As I said, this has been my third term, and that would put me on the court 18 years, which Heck, I've never done anything that long, other than be married to my wife. I suppose that's but it is a great honor to serve in this capacity and have the trust. I mean, the trust that what a judge has, and all of us have, we're supposed to have your trust. I mean, we're the final word. We make these decisions at the end and we issue our opinions. They're opinions. They're not law, they're opinions. And so I would ask that you learn about these races. I come in and the first thing I do is say, how many here can name 2 Supreme Court judges on the state of Texas? Folks look at me like I've dropped off the end of a turnip truck. They don't know. They don't know because you don't think it affects your daily life. I'm here to tell you tonight it does affect your daily life. And you ought to be concerned and involved in it. I know it's hard. I mean, heck, I have a hard time getting through them all. But that's the beauty of our form of government. You're supposed to be in charge. Don't surrender that to folks who appear to be neglecting your interests. They're neglecting your interests, in my view, in many jurisdictions. And so you need to hold them accountable. And you need to know what the court's doing. And you need to, unfortunately, you're going to have to read some of these opinions. But thank you for being here tonight. I mean, that's the first step. Thank you, Suzanne, for being so faithful. She was from Montgomery County, where I knew her, and she'll go down swinging. And that's a great virtue. But thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, Suzanne, for your diligence and vigilance in this cause. God bless you, and God bless the state of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're also honored that Justice Devine is going to stick around for the second forum as well. So going into the second forum, we're going to do 5-minute openings, 3 minutes for questions, and then 5-minute closings. We'll try to wrap this up in 45 minutes. We drew numbers earlier, and David Schenk drew number 1. So if you'd like to open with 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, John. I will stay here on camera if that's all right with you. My name is David Schenk. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having us and for inviting us. I am running for the presiding judge position on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. As you've heard, we have 2 Supreme Courts in Texas. That makes us in Oklahoma unique. The court is very important. People's understanding of it, however, is very limited. Their knowledge of who's on it and what it does is somewhat limited until recently when more attention started to be paid to the court and its work. And I think that's extremely helpful, and I think people should be studying the court, and I think that they should be voting based on what they see in those studies. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. First, I've got a couple minutes here. I come from a farming background. My great-grandfathers, all the way back to as far as anyone can trace, were ministers and farmers. My father grew up on a dairy farm I now own. One of 12 kids, 3 bedrooms, managed somehow to become a physicist and a medical doctor and develop a piece of technology that made his employer billions of dollars and kept us in the middle class because that's the way patents work. I decided I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go to law school. I came to Baylor. To my surprise, I ended up first in my class at Baylor, and my professors urged me to go clerk for a person who was the chief judge of the Federal Fifth Circuit that sits over Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And from there, I went to a law firm in Washington, D.C. and did U.S. Supreme Court work for a couple of years. And I came back and eventually ran that practice here in Texas. In private practice, I went out and did a lot of what Justice Devine was talking about in terms of amicus brief work and representations in cases that are kind of, to my view, important. One of them was the Heller case in the U.S. Supreme Court. I represented Texas State Rifle Association and 42 other state associations, urging the recognition of the Second Amendment. I also participated here in the Fifth Circuit, my old court. I clerked for the Chief Judge of the Fifth Circuit. In a case called Emerson, that was the first case the Fifth Circuit recognized the Second Amendment as an individual right. I represented a guy named Wenho Lee, who was a himself a physicist at Los Alamos. You may remember the Clinton administration claiming he was a Chinese spy, having him locked up by a federal judge. We got him released, got an apology from the federal judge that the FBI, does this sound familiar, had lied to him and misled him about his background. And we then sued, this was one of the most fun cases I ever got to participate in, sued CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Clinton administration, and one more. And they tried to get that up to the US Supreme Court. We beat them in the DC Circuit. There is no First Amendment reporter's privilege, by the way. They have to disclose who in the government was lying about him, leaking information about him. And eventually they said, can we just pay you a couple $1 million? And we said, okay. So if you come to my office, and I welcome you to come, you'll see a check up on my wall, 2 of them. One is from the United States Treasury, and the other one is from the major media organization. We gave all the money to Wenho. We didn't take a legal fee. But I really enjoyed doing cases like that. And at some point, I was talked into leaving and going to Austin to be the chief counsel to the Attorney General. And I was going to be doing all kinds of things other than appellate litigation. And the next thing you know, there's a guy named Ted Cruz who had recruited me to go to work at that office, who decides he's going to run for office against our client, who is David Dewhurst, the head of the Senate. And they thought it's a bad idea to have checks being written from the AG's office to our client's opponent. Would you like to lead the defense of redistricting this cycle? And I said, well, okay, I haven't done that. It'll be interesting. What a disaster. I mean, it was 2 3-judge panels in San Antonio and Washington, D.C. I had a pregnant wife and a 1-year-old child going back and forth between Austin and Dallas, being accused of everything in the book. Texas is horrible, Texas is this, Texas is that. Remember when the primary kept getting moved? That was every couple of weeks, me in a courtroom in San Antonio getting abused by 3 judges, and ended up in the US Supreme Court on that. We won that 9-0. Good luck trying to do that again in a voting rights case coming out of Texas. And then I went on to the 5th Court of Appeals of Dallas. That's the largest appellate court in the state. And it was a wonderful experience for quite a while. I went on from there to go to a job that was also somewhat enlightening, being a commissioner and later chairman of the State Commission of Judicial Conduct. That's the body that watches the behavior of the judges in Texas to make sure that it's appropriate and to take corrective and mentoring actions where necessary. This is from justices of the peace that you heard about all the way up to the presiding judge and the Chief Justice of the Texas Supreme Court. And I don't know if it'll come up in questions or not, but I want to touch back on a topic that Suzanne mentioned before, and I want to make a point of clarification. We do have some corruption in state government, in every government, in human nature. We're inclined towards that. Very little. What we do have a lot of is inaction in dealing with that real problem. And my real concern with these top courts, the court I'm running for and the Supreme Court, is they've been under the same stewardship for most of this century, and they are not taking very basic, very simple actions to avoid the appearance of unfairness. And the relationship between money and decisions made by the court is a matter that is easy to fix. I briefed this issue in the US Supreme Court. I've been talking about it for 20 years. And in my view, I'm just going to say it's unforgivable that today you can have a judge call you with a case pending in front of him and ask you for $5,000, get it, and not have the other side told immediately, and the judge still sit on your case. Shouldn't happen. Nobody wants to defend it. That's got to be fixed. But there's serious challenges on the Court of Criminal Appeals. I'm ready to fix them. I'm the only candidate on the ballot who's actually eligible to serve the term that's before you. My opponent, I commend her for many years of service, but she cannot serve the term.
Hey, thank you. Ms. Gina Parker? Yes.
I'm more comfortable standing up anyway. So, first of all, let me say thank you, Suzanne. It's just been a pleasure to get to be with you here tonight. And she helped us get our ballot signatures. So we travel all over the state, and we have to have so many signatures to be on the ballot. And I grew up in the grassroots of the party. My mom was the vice chairman of our party. And so when I was a teenager, I was out handing out Christian Coalition voters guides and putting them on the cars. So I've been involved at every level. And so I truly appreciate what you're doing here tonight. And Before I get too far down the line, though, I have family here from Corpus. I'm from Waco. I drove 6 hours here to see you and to see all the rest of you. And but I have a cousin here, Donald Parker, and so he came out to be with me tonight, and we have some great stories. So we grew up with he lived with my grandparents for a while, and so we did a lot of hunting and fishing, and in fact, I killed my first deer at 11. I have to brag a little bit here, bringing up some good memories. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. Back to being grassroots oriented. So I've served at just about every level in the party. Usually I didn't get to be precinct chair because I was the secretary at the precinct meetings. But I served also at the state party level under David Barton and Susan Weddington. I was the associate general counsel for the party and also the treasurer for the state party. And then I've served as the Central Texas Republican Women's president for one of the Republican Women's Clubs. So I've been very, very active at a lot of levels. In addition to that, I've been a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. I started out as an assistant county attorney and then later went to work as an assistant district attorney. I've been both a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. In addition to that, I had the honor of serving as a commissioner and chairing the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulations. That was one of the best experiences of my life. And when we did that, we would hear administrative law appeals. So I heard thousands of those appeals that would come before us during that 8 years while I was serving. We regulated 21 different industries, and we heard appeals before our commission. So that was another really good experience and a very good learning experience for me. In addition to that, what I'm the most proud of that I want to share with you tonight is that I am the constitutional conservative in this race. How many of you are familiar with our voter guide? Any of y'all ever look at that? It rates you as to whether or not you're a moderate or a conservative. My opponent's rating was basically she was a moderate, and I was the conservative when you look at our records there. So I'm definitely the conservative in this race. My mentor is Phyllis Schlafly. Some of you may know her if you've been around long enough. So she was very pleased with my work. And so I was awarded the Texas Eagle Forum Award for my work in support of and dedication to the United States Constitution. I traveled all over Texas speaking on the Bill of Rights. In addition to that, I served as her National Judicial Reform Chairperson. So I was very active, knew Phyllis very well. And so she certainly has influenced my life. When you ask about the justices that we all like or, admire, I'll have to say, even though she wasn't on the bench, she was my mentor and someone who I looked up to. She wrote a book called The Supremacists about the judges and what was wrong with our United States Supreme Court. And the subscript was the tyranny of judges and how to stop it. I had the great honor to work with her on the study guide. I will say she's quite the lady, so I was more of a rubber stamp than anything else, but it was still an honor and a privilege to work with her. And so in this race, I want to just tell you, too, who I've been endorsed by, because I think endorsements tell us a lot. I have been endorsed by Donald Trump Jr., and so I'm really excited about that. And so hoping maybe we'll get Donald Trump himself to endorse me. So, but I'm thankful for that endorsement. Also, our Attorney General, Ken Paxton. And our Agriculture Commissioner, Sid Miller, has endorsed me. Yeah, some great guys there, solid conservatives and leaders. I've been endorsed by Texas Right to Life, the Texas Homeschool Association, Gun Owners of America, and this great group here, Coastal Bend Republicans. Woohoo! And so I was happy to see my name on the sample ballot that y'all will be handing out. So thank you very much for that endorsement. I appreciate it, truly. These endorsements, I'm not a politician, okay? I've got involved because of the values I believed in. I was reading a book and writing a book actually on the abortion issue when I decided to go to law school. And I've stayed engaged and involved and served in a lot of different capacities because that's where my heart is. And so that's why I love being in these kind of meetings and being a part of what's happening here. Are you tired of judges who legislate from the bench? Yes. Well, I won't be that kind of judge. I am the constitutional conservative, and my promise to you is not to betray your trust, but to hold that trust as precious and as a gift that you've given to me, and to be the solid conservative that you expect me to be on that bench. And I'm here tonight asking for your vote.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is wonderful to be here. Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you to this group. My name is Michelle Slaughter, and I am one of your very hardworking statewide elected judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals running for re-election. Since joining the court in January 2019, I have participated in deciding more than 20,000 criminal law matters. And that is because the Court of Criminal Appeals is one of the busiest appellate courts in the nation. We receive about 3 times the number of filings as the Texas Supreme Court, and we issue about 3 times the number of opinions that they do as well. And that is not to take anything away from our very hardworking Texas Supreme Court. That is just to illustrate how incredibly busy we are on the Court of Criminal Appeals. You heard a little bit about what the court does. So we are direct appeal on all death penalty cases. So literally, we are deciding matters of life and death. We also are discretionary review from cases from the courts of appeals, and we are original jurisdiction on all post-conviction writs of habeas corpus. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the different actual innocence issues where someone has been convicted and sentenced to death, and then they're later on exonerated, and those come to us usually on these post-conviction writs of habeas corpus. We get thousands of those every year. They can be issues where it's a convicted defendant or convicted criminal defendant is challenging their conviction or some aspect of their conviction outside of the normal appellate process. So maybe a witness has changed their testimony, says I lied on the stand, or there's new evidence. We find out the state has withheld evidence that would have helped that person, or maybe it's ineffective assistance of counsel. It could be any number of things, and we get those challenges to us. Before joining the Court of Criminal Appeals, I was a trial judge in the 405th District Court of Galveston County. I ran and won against a 12-year incumbent Democrat judge. I was the first Republican judge of the 405th District Court, and I ran because I was tired of complaining. I was a practicing attorney. I worked for 2 large international law firms. I made a great living. I loved being an attorney, loved my job, loved the clients that I worked with. But in Galveston County where I lived, we had 2 very liberal, activist district court judges who I saw what they were doing, and I said, I can't take anymore. No one's running against them, and I have to do something. So I took a more than 50% pay cut to run and beat this 12-year incumbent judge, and I have not regretted it because I love what I do. I'm passionate about our justice system. When I took over that court, thank you very much. So when I took over that court, it was the least efficient, least effective district court with the highest backlog in all of Galveston County. And within my first 2 years on the bench, I worked hard and I transformed that court into the most efficient, most effective district court with the lowest backlog. And again, I did that within my first 2 years. In addition, I promoted transparency for the court, and I also found ways to save more taxpayer dollars, saving thousands of taxpayer dollars every single year I was on that bench. So when there was an open seat on the Court of Criminal Appeals, I decided it was time to do something at a higher level and to be able to impact more cases and more of our justice system. So I ran and won. There was a 3-person primary in 2018, 2 very highly qualified opponents in the primary. I won without a runoff. And that is because I believe in working hard and showing my conservative values. My conservative values go back my entire life. My grandmother, my abuelita, was raised in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. She came here and was a legal citizen, and she despised illegal immigration. She said, no one will appreciate this country as much as those of us who came here legally. And she was right.
And then, of course, I was, raised hunting and fishing as well. My grandparents lived in East Texas, and I loved hunting and fishing. I was vice president of the Rifle Club in college. I'm currently serving and have for many years on the board of my local pregnancy center. And so I also have tremendous conservative endorsements, including Texas Right to Life, Texas Alliance for Life, Texas Values, and many, many more. I also have extensive law enforcement endorsements across the entire state, because law enforcement knows what we do on the court. They know the importance of our work. They have to know about our opinions in order to do their job properly. And so I've been endorsed all across the state by law enforcement. The Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas, the Houston Police Officers Union, San Antonio Police Officers Association, Dallas Police Officers Association, every single local police organization and police officer in my home county of Galveston County, because they know what I did as a district court judge. In fact, the inmates in the Galveston County Jail used to refer to my courtroom as a slaughterhouse. So, but anyway, I have those endorsements because law enforcement across the state of Texas knows that I am a law and order judge. So I would really love to have your help and your support in my reelection, and so please vote to keep Judge Slaughter. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move into questions and answers. We have about 15 minutes for that before we go into the closing comments. So is there any questions from the audience? And just keep in mind if we can address it to all three panelists, so that gives them an opportunity to respond.
Can I keep the mic, or I pass it back to David?
Sure. I think the question is for Judge Slaughter. I'm not sure who else can answer. Can you hear me okay? Anyhow, we all watched the impeachment of Ken Paxton. And we saw that the case supposedly was settled. We know a lot of people are still after him. But it came to my attention that that case somehow went to the Court of Appeals. Is that correct?
No, we have nothing to do with the impeachment. The impeachment is a political process. It's not a criminal process.
So that was what? The civic fraud? Fraud department.
So what I believe you're talking about is our State versus Stevens case. And in that case, the court utilized a very strict interpretation of our Texas Constitution as originally written to find unconstitutional an election code provision that purported to authorize the Attorney General to criminally prosecute election law violations. So our Texas Constitution, was ratified in 1876. It has an express separation of powers provision. The Attorney General and all statewide elected officers were placed in the executive department. And that is because, in Texas, we had lived under two tyrannical centralized governments. First one under Mexico, and the second one on the union-backed folks who in Reconstruction, where the governor was so powerful and so tyrannical that, that was our 1869 Constitution. So in 1876, Texans said, enough is enough. We don't want a powerful centralized government anymore. So all statewide elected officials, other than judges, were placed in the executive department, express separation of powers provision, and that was to prevent our statewide elected officials from interfering in our local communities where they did not know the communities the way the people did. So in our local communities, of course, we're able to have more control and accountability for our locally elected officials. For instance, here, if you had if the governor did something that you hated, it's a lot harder to defeat the governor just based upon something you hated in this county, because it's a statewide election. But, if it's your local district attorney or your local, mayor, it's easier to get rid of them if they do something that you don't like. Anyway, so the AG is in the executive department, has very specifically enumerated duties. Every single one of those duties is a civil law duty. And since 1836, when that position was created by executive ordinance, the AG has always had just civil law duties and has never had the authority and the duty to criminally prosecute cases. For a short time, he had the ability to take criminal cases on appeal. And then once the state prosecuting attorney's office was created, then that ended that. In the judicial department, that's where the district attorneys are located, district and county attorneys. that district and county attorneys are given the express constitutional duty under the Texas Constitution that they shall represent the state of Texas in all cases in the district and inferior courts. And since 1836, it has always been the district and county attorney's duties to criminally prosecute cases, and it has never been the AG's duty. In fact, I have wrote an opinion on rehearing that walks through over 160 years of every Texas Supreme Court case and every Court of Criminal Appeals case that ever addressed this issue. And in every single situation, the courts have always said that it is the exclusive duty of the district attorney to prosecute criminal cases to the exclusion of the Attorney General.
Okay, and so why don't you?
Either one of the other candidates, Ms. Gina Parker or Dave Schenk, like to respond to that?
Oh, do I want to? But I am not going to get down in the weeds on that particular opinion. I think that the public concern over that opinion is very healthy. I'm going to say, judges and judicial candidates, in my view, ought not be talking about what they would do in cases and matters that could come before them, because I don't want to be accused of promising outcomes in cases based on assurances I'm making publicly. What I want you to do instead is ask yourself this question: does this court need change? Yes. Hell yes, okay? And it's not just one particular opinion, it's a series of opinions. And more importantly, it's about stewardship. The court is courts, judges. In my view, I've seen enough of it in the federal system, state system, on the Conduct Commission. You're either smart or you're less. You're either honest or you're less. You either work hard or you don't. If you're not all three of those things, you're a problem. And there's problems on that court. And we don't have time to go through all of them, but it needs different leadership. I'll leave it at that. With respect to that particular decision, here's what I'm willing to say. If you're going to write a seminal, new constitutional opinion that is going to undermine confidence in the elections and the judiciary simultaneously, you had better write clear, persuasive, and tight. And that is not that opinion. It is a word salad with a bunch of citations in the middle of it. I think, I'm not going to say how I would vote on that. I would just say I would read the text involved in the Constitution and I would follow it. And I think I'm fine with people coming to different conclusions about what they want to do in any particular case, but I think that the court needs to anchor itself in the text, follow the words, and think about what it's writing.
Thank you, David. Well, let me just be frank. I disagree with Michelle Slaughter, and you can just be wrong sometimes, and that's my opinion. This case stripped our Attorney General of his ability to unilaterally prosecute election fraud. What does that mean here in Texas? That means in blue cities with Soros-backed DAs that election fraud is going to go unchecked. It's not just Ken Paxton that's calling out Michelle Slaughter and Sharon Keller and my opponent, Barbara Hervey, but Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said that he disagreed with the opinion. He said it was totally unacceptable. And not only that, Governor Abbott, who served on the Texas Supreme Court and also served as your Attorney General, he said that our AG is the highest law enforcement officer in Texas, and he had the right to prosecute election fraud. So these very conservative statewide officials, thank you, are standing strong and standing up and being a voice. And I'm here to tell you, as I'm traveling statewide, it's not just the elected officials, it is you, it's we the people, and they're rising up. And those of us who are running, like myself, and I'll speak for myself in this situation, we're garnering support statewide. One group out of Kingwood is sending out 1 million emails supporting us because of this erroneous decision. I like Michelle Slaughter. She's a very pleasant person, but you can just be wrong sometimes. And I totally disagree with her interpretation on this case. And so that's my perspective on it. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am, if you'd like a 1-minute rebuttal.
So I can appreciate, look, voter fraud is a serious issue. I'm not trying to downplay voter fraud. It is a serious issue that we have to be concerned about. And my job depends on free and fair elections. And so I'm not trying to downplay the issue of voter fraud, but I'm standing for what the Constitution says. Our Texas Constitution is crystal clear. I invite you to read it. Read the Texas Constitution and the duties, the enumerated duties of the Attorney General and the enumerated duties of the district attorneys. As a judge, I am a constitutional conservative and originalist. I would never judicially amend our Texas Constitution. Constitutional amendments have to be for we the people, not for judges. And I'm not an activist judge for any reason, especially not for political expediency. So what needs to happen is either a constitutional amendment or, as I even proposed in my dissenting opinion that, an option maybe if a DA, one of these source-appointed DAs has abandoned his express constitutional duty, that perhaps then the Attorney General could utilize the statute to then take over that case. But when the Texas Constitution has the express constitutional duty for the DAs that they shall represent the state of Texas in all cases in the trial courts, I'm sorry, there's no getting around that unless I were to judicially amend the Texas Constitution. And I just can't do that as a judge.
Thank you.
I disagree with that. That's not what the Texas Constitution says. And so that's where we have a disagreement of opinion. And obviously, our governor, who is a former attorney general, disagrees with you and this court as well. And so basically, that's not what the Constitution says. So if you read the Texas Constitution, it gives the attorney general all other powers as prescribed by law or by the legislature. And the legislature gave the attorney general in this particular situation the power to prosecute election fraud. So we can pass this microphone back and forth between each other the rest of the night and we're never going to agree. So, but there's definitely a difference of opinion. And so, if I might add, this court in a prior opinion said, this very court that we're all running for, said that the AG had these kind of powers. Also, the same court that Texas Supreme Court in a 1905 case called Brady said the same thing. Said that the Attorney General had authority, but it was in a civil situation, not in a criminal case. So we have prior precedent. We've overturned years, decades of precedent in order to reach this conclusion, which was an erroneously reached decision.
Okay, I have to read this. Okay, this is a 1874 case, 1874 from the Texas Supreme Court, Kutchler versus Wright. And what Ms. Parker here is talking about is perform such other duties as may be required by law. That specific phrase was interpreted by the Texas Supreme Court before the 1876 Constitution was ratified. And the Chief Justice said that means the legislature can only assign duties that are of the same character of the officer's department, that properly pertain to the business of that particular office, and cannot interfere with a duty expressly assigned by the Constitution to an officer in a different department. The conclusion in that opinion in 1874 was that the district attorney had the duty to represent the state of Texas in the trial courts to the exclusion of the attorney general. That was in 1874. Then again, after the Texas Constitution was ratified in 1882, the Texas Supreme Court again addressed that exact same phrase and said that phrase does not allow the Attorney General to prosecute criminal cases in the trial courts, that is the duty of the district attorney. So again, The AG has civil law authority. We're different in Texas. Does not have the ability to initiate criminal cases.
Thank you. Mr. Schenk, if you'd like to respond. Because this is obviously a hot topic for everyone.
I will respectfully decline, other than to say the Texas Supreme Court gets to speak for the Texas Supreme Court. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is responsible for its own decisions. And I'll leave it at that. Can we have another topic, maybe?
Sure. All right. We probably have time for 1 to 2 more questions. I guess we'll do one follow-up from Suzanne, and then I saw 2 hands in the back, and that'll probably wrap up the question part.
Thank you. This is definitely one of the hot topics of this election. And as you know, we endorsed Michelle Slaughter a few years back. And I would say, like Gina Parker, maybe sometime anybody can be wrong. But this is a very important question. I'm not a judge, so I'm not going to tell you legally what is or not, what can stand. What I know is, as a citizen, for us, if there is no fair election, there is no country. There is no state, there is no country. Election integrity is the key. If we give back the power of judging whether or not there is election fraud to the district attorney of the district where all the fraud happens, which is Dallas, Houston, Austin, we don't have election integrity anymore because that's half of Texas already. So I think this is a very important question that needs debating and continue to be. So to follow up on what I think Barbara was starting to discuss about, which was the other reason for many of our endorsement, was what the follow-up with Ken Paxton, not the impeachment, but the other cases around it, whether it was a fraud case or those things. So I think that's something that she was trying to address, and that I would like you all to address. The past, not the future. Again, I understand that you don't want to discuss against future cases, so I'll give it back to you.
Oh, so well, I'm sorry, can you clarify the question? Because I think we were addressing that, and do you want us to talk about it further? Is that what you're saying? Oh, you want us to talk about the security frauds criminal case for Ken Paxton? Yeah, we can't discuss that. That's set for trial in April in Harris County, and we can't talk about that case. Yeah.
Was there a question in the back? All right, Miss Becky.
I came across this article and video that came out about 4 or 5 days ago, so I don't know if you've seen it or heard about it. The title is Unborn Child Left Unprotected by Judge's Ruling. And in a nutshell, it talks about a pregnant young woman, and the father of the baby wants the mother to abort the baby, and she says no. And basically he's kind of like gang member tactics, threatening her that if she doesn't abort the baby, that he will. And I was just wondering, is there even a precedence to protect that unborn baby?
So a person, under Texas law, a person includes the definition of an unborn child. And as I've told you, I am serving on the board of a pregnancy center. So you know how I feel about that issue. I actually voted to grant that case so that we could review it. So that was misstated, and I even informed Weston Martinez, who put that out. I said, you have this wrong, and I sent him, the vote where I voted to grant that case. I voted because I thought we should hear it and decide it. And so, yes. So that, yeah, I was one of there were myself and Judge Geary were the only two on the court who said, we need to grant this case and hear it. Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Ms. Parker or anyone? Okay.
That's from Michelle and her colleagues. We were not there at the time.
Awesome. We have time for one more question. I saw a few different hands back there. Okay, no hands? I would say let's move into the closing comments. We do have some time, so let's extend it to 5 minutes each. We'll go in reverse order of what we started. So Judge Slaughter, if you'd like to start with your closing comments, 5 minutes.
Well, again, I appreciate y'all having us here, and I understand the heated nature of the voter fraud issue. And I just want you to understand, and I would love for you to read my opinion and look at the breakdown of the law and the cases on my website, which is judgemichelleslaughter.com. And if you have one of my cards, my website's on there. Please look at that, because it's a hot button issue, and you know, people have a knee-jerk reaction about it. But again, I'm a proven and uncompromising constitutional conservative and originalist judge. I'm never going to be an activist judge, regardless of public or political pressure or any sort of outside influence. I am always going to strictly interpret our Constitution and laws as written and as originally intended, even if I do not like the law or the outcome. As Justice Scalia said, and I'm paraphrasing, but Justice Scalia said, if you're a judge and you like every decision you reach, you're probably not doing it right. We don't like all the decisions that strictly interpreting the law mandates us to reach. So I want you to understand that. And so we don't like voter fraud. We think, I certainly think that voter fraud needs to be prosecuted to the full extent. Now, our opinion came out in 2021. Why didn't the legislature do something about it? That's their role. It is their role to propose a constitutional amendment. It is their role that they could have created a new DA district or tried to create some legislation to give authority to, adjacent counties' DAs to prosecute these cases that wouldn't be prosecuted by the local DA. There are options that they had to try to fix this issue. They didn't do that. So please don't blame us. We're just the messenger. This is an issue back in, 57. There's a case out of the San Antonio Court of Appeals called Shepard versus Alanis, where the Court of Appeals there told the legislature this is an unconstitutional statute. They put them on notice. They didn't have to decide the issue in that case, but they put them on notice. I talk about it in my opinion. So for years and years, the legislature has known that this is a problem that was going to come up at some point. And it happened to come up in our 2021 decision, and that's we finally had to say, this is unconstitutional because it was a matter that became squarely before us. So that is how we decided on a strict interpretation of our Texas Constitution. But that's one case out of the tens of thousands of cases that I've heard in the past 5 years. Let me tell you, I'd love to tell you about some of our other cases that are of critical importance. Just this Wednesday, I wrote a dissenting opinion on a case, involving our right to bear arms. So, I wrote an opinion about how, a man was pulled over, actually wasn't pulled over. He was on the side of the road hanging out of his truck, and a police officer did a welfare check on him. And there was a gun in a holster in his map pocket on the side door. And the police officer secured that weapon and then tried to wake the guy up, and he woke up, and then the officer determined that he was showing signs of intoxication and charged him with DWI and unlawful carrying of a weapon. So misdemeanor DWI, but because of the statute, said that this misdemeanor DWI gave him the right to also charge him with unlawful carrying of a weapon when there's nothing showing that he had any criminal history at all. And it's in a holster in the door of his vehicle. I wrote a dissenting opinion saying, because the court was refusing to hear that, I said, we need to hear this case. This violates the Texas Constitution's provision regarding the right to bear arms. Because we have the right to, the legislature has the authority to regulate the wearing of arms, whether, it's on you, in a holster or, that sort of thing. But as I say in my opinion, it doesn't have the right to regulate the bearing of arms when there's no connection between the criminal activity and having that gun. So I wrote that dissenting opinion, and it'll go back. It's pre-trial, so it'll get to maybe he'll raise that back when it goes back down to him. But we'll see. I wrote the opinion; it's published, so I'm not telling you anything that's not publicly available. And anyway, so that's just one. Another one is that as you've all heard, these liberal judges in places like Harris County aren't setting proper bonds. They're giving PR bonds and letting people out with no bond or low $500 bonds with their violent criminals. Our court should never have to set bonds. We've had to set bonds on a number of cases out of Harris County. So the DA's office will actually bring them to us and say, this is an insufficient bond. We've wound up, issuing bonds for $100,000, $500,000 because the judges below were setting ridiculously low bonds on violent offenders. So I'm here to tell you and show you that we are working hard for you. We are a strong law and order court and conservative court, and I certainly am a strong conservative judge, and I hope that you'll vote to keep Judge Slaughter. Thank you.
Ms. Gina Parker.
Okay. Thank you again for having us. We wanted to make sure y'all had a good time tonight, so we gave you a little feisty debate. So I did forget to mention that my husband is traveling with me, and I have to say thank you to him, Dr. Kevin Kalal. And I really appreciate him. There was a time, and I just talked to you, I think I've shared my credentials, and we've debated the Stevens decision. But there was a time when I really, I've always wanted to be on the bench. Always wanted to be a judge. In fact, I had an opportunity to serve at the district court level, but felt like I needed more experience just practicing law. And so I turned down that appointment. But my husband had a lot of vision, and he's a man of prayer, and so he stood with me and kept encouraging me to run. And so because of that, I'm here today, and I just have to thank him for driving me here. That's a long trip, and he's been on the road with me every step of the way, and so I truly appreciate that. And I want to say, I hung up my political spurs, so to speak, here a few years back. I ran several years ago, as Suzanne was mentioning, for this same court, and I thought, well, I did my duty, and I've run, and I came very close to winning. I learned a lot. It was interesting. Toward the end of my campaign, my opponent, who's currently on this bench and participated in this Stevens decision, we were attending an event, a Tea Party event, and they were asking us questions about the Second Amendment and asking us questions about the Constitution. And I will never forget this as long as I live. I was in shock. A sitting judge answered the question, several questions after he became frustrated. He said, "What does the Constitution have to do with the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals?" It is important that we are in these races. And then the next time I saw him at a political event, he brought all of us who were running for judge a copy of the United States Constitution, one of those little pocketbook copies. So it shows you how important what we're doing here is, and staying engaged in the process, because you're holding us accountable. My running in that race, even though I didn't win, it was shining a light on the situation and what was happening with this court. So we got to stay in the race. We have to stay in the battle. In life, we have to be persistent, and we can never give up. Sometimes it's easy to give up on marriage. So I don't think there's a perfect marriage. And sometimes it's easy to give up on, our country, even when you see what's happening. But I want to encourage you to stay in the fight, to continue to stand strong for your values. My scripture at the beginning of this year was Hebrews 10:39. I am not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but I am of those who are saved. Amen? So, we're going to be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might, and be courageous and stand for what we believe in. And so that's what gives me the strength and the courage every day to travel across the state, to work hard, to stay up late, and to make a difference for our state and for our country and for my God. And so I won't take any more time. I know y'all are probably tired. I just want to thank you again for coming out. I want to ask for your vote. And I'm glad my cousin showed up here. I'm sure he brought me a big check. Make that too, he said. And anybody else who wants to donate, it's www.ginaparker.com, ginaparkercampaign.com, and you can donate online. I have Anadot there. And but most of all, pray for me, vote for me, and if the Lord puts it on your heart, you can donate for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all again very much for being kind enough to come out and listen to all of us. We really appreciate you paying attention, you're studying this race, and you're caring enough about your state and your country to stay involved. This is an important election, okay? I think you can understand that. There's more than one reason why this is an important election. The current Constitution of Texas was passed in February of 1876. The words are the words. The text is the text, and the words had the meaning that they had when they passed it in February 1876. If you have to look beyond the words and start explaining somewhere else, you're in trouble, okay? You're doing something else other than applying the words. You can call it activism, and you can call it a lot of things. People make mistakes, we all do. I'm not saying any particular decision was did incorrectly. What I'm saying is people are now paying attention to that court, and it's not just one opinion, okay? This court struck down the Open Meetings Act. This court told the legislature that it didn't have the authority to require any court to give the state notice and an opportunity to be heard before any statute was declared unconstitutional by a court. In other words, go pound sand, we do it our way, how we want and when we want. That is a court out of control. I'm going to disagree a little bit with one thing I heard tonight about the court's workload. And again, this is not any particular judge other really than the presiding judge. That's the position I'm running for. Just the last month, I think yesterday or the day before, the court put out a whole one opinion. That case was sitting in front of the court since 2019. 2019. A month before, 5 opinions came out, 3 of them from 2019 and 2020. There's one judge, Kevin Yeary, who's putting out 120 or so opinions himself a year. That's fairly typical. The court I clerked on, we put out 200 a year. And we did them within 9 months typically of when the cases were filed. And that court also has a heavy writ docket of not just state writs, but federal writs. I wrote about 120 opinions myself a year. The rest of those judges are averaging 27. Okay, somebody writing an opinion on what the law of Texas is, taking 5 years to do it, is inexcusable. A district attorney cannot indict a case or try a case if he doesn't know what he has to allege a crime to be. That issue was decided last month in this court. The whole world saw that petition granted in 2019, and the law wasn't clarified until January of 2024. In the interim, those counties were not indicting those cases because they didn't know what they had to charge. The offense is called evading arrest. You have people driving at high speed, leading the police on chases all over some of these counties. Where is the court? What kind of stewardship is that? It is absolutely unforgivable, okay? And somebody has to be in charge. And somebody has to be in charge of this entire judiciary. The one thing that came out of Stephen's opinion, which I'll agree with, is those local county attorneys and district attorneys are parked in a judiciary. Who's responsible for them? Let me ask you that question. What's the implication of that part of that opinion? Who is in charge of those district attorneys? Apparently nobody. They're making laws for themselves in some of these jurisdictions. They're declaring themselves the legislature. Shoplift less than $750 in the county I live in, and it's not a crime anymore. And they're not shy about it. They're telling everybody. Who's going to grab those guys and say, you took an oath? You're in charge of enforcing the law within your county. They have to be answerable and accountable to somebody. And what this takes is leadership. It's not a country club. It's not a sinecure. It's an opportunity to serve. And if the courts belong to the public, not to the people who are parked on them. Okay? They have a job to do. And that job, first and foremost, above everything else, is making sure that you, out on the other side of the bench, have confidence that the people who are doing it are fair. That's been a major problem. I haven't gotten into the details about this, but you can go back and look. Sleeping lawyers giving adequate defense to people who are up for capital murder. One of your former colleagues who sat with you on the Court of Criminal Appeals tried a guy for capital murder, found him guilty while sleeping with the prosecutor who's trying him. Okay, can that be happening in our courts? We gotta stop it. I served at a big court that went bad. I was alone, 12-1, on whether you could say abortion is murder in the state of Texas without being sued. I was alone in saying that Children's Hospital had the right to say, I'm not going to perform gender transition services here. I'm not afraid to take on tough issues. I'm proud to be endorsed by your club, by Ken Paxton, by Donald Trump Jr., and I'll just say it, the Dallas Morning News and the Houston Chronicle. You are never going to see this, because the problem here, this combination of endorsements, again, because the problem is that obvious and that large, we just need change. I'm David Schenk, Schenk for Texas. Please take a yard sign. God bless you all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Before you guys rush out, this restaurant is still open. Suzanne's going to give a couple of closing comments.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we had a great debate. I think that was one of our best forums. It was a lot of very important issues, and we are thankful that you were all here to debate them. I think it's a very good eye-opener. So these forums tonight, number 5 and number 6, conclude our forum series, luckily, because now we're voting already. And now it's your turn to be heard. It's your job. So next week we are going to have, instead of our regular meeting or candidate forum, we will have a rally, Texas Votes Red. It will be, if weather permits, downstairs on the patio outside. So please join us and call everybody to join us. If you like what we do, we like the candidates, we ask for donations and volunteers. You have on your tables a form that has 2 sides. One is to join, donate, or just ask to receive our newsletter. The other side is to volunteer. So we hope you fill both sides, but at least one of them. So thank you very much. And we're going to be here for a little while more. If you'd like to speak with our candidates, this is a great time. Get to know them, get to ask more questions, and thank you very much, everybody.